Do you ever wonder what happens in the unseen realm when genuine love is taken for granted? When someone who gives with pure intentions encounters betrayal instead of reciprocity? There's something profound that unfolds in those moments, something that reaches beyond the immediate heartbreak, beyond what the eyes can see or the mind can explain. I want you to imagine this for a moment. A woman who has poured her soul into a relationship. She's given her time, her energy, her loyalty, her heart. Every part of her intention was rooted in truth. But one day, the person she trusted most, the one who promised to protect her heart, becomes the very source of her pain. What happens next is not just emotional turmoil. It's not simply sadness or disappointment. It's a shift in energy, a spiritual reaction in the unseen universe that starts the moment trust is broken. Because when genuine love is betrayed, balance must be restored. Every act of deception sends a ripple, not just through that relationship, but through the life of the one who caused it. The universe, or as I prefer to say, divine order, begins its quiet work of realignment. Now, this isn't about punishment. It's not about revenge or karma in the shallow sense. It's about divine balance. Every time love is given with sincerity and met with betrayal, something in the spiritual atmosphere changes. Integrity bends, energy distorts, and consequences begin to unfold, not out of cruelty, but out of universal law. You see, everything in creation operates on the principle of return. What you release eventually comes back to you, multiplied in form and meaning. Before we go deeper, I want to make something clear. This isn't a message about gender. It's not about men versus women. It's about the sacred responsibility of handling love, the most powerful energy in existence. Whether you're the one who has been hurt or the one who caused the hurt, there's a lesson, a transformation, and a divine realignment that awaits. Let's begin with what happens to the one who loved genuinely, to the woman whose heart was pure. When she experiences betrayal, she doesn't just feel sadness, she experiences an inner earthquake. Her mind begins to wrestle with disbelief. The person she once called safe now feels like a stranger. Her memories start to blur. Her trust begins to tremble, and suddenly the world she built in love begins to collapse. At first, she tries to make sense of it. She replays moments, looking for clues, trying to understand how the person she trusted could become the source of her deepest wound. This confusion, this internal chaos, is the first sign that her transformation has begun, because beneath the pain, something sacred is happening. Her soul is awakening. Many assume that betrayal destroys a woman, but I've seen time and again that it often awakens her. The pain, though cruel and undeserved, becomes the fire that refines her. At first, she breaks, but what emerges later is not the same person who was broken. It's someone wiser, sharper, and spiritually attuned. Betrayal forces her to confront the illusions she once believed in. It teaches her to discern between love and manipulation, between promises and patterns, between attention and intention. This is the cocoon phase, a season where the woman who once gave freely now withdraws, not out of bitterness, but out of divine recalibration. The same openness that once made her vulnerable begins to evolve into discernment. The same tenderness that was once taken advantage of becomes strength cloaked in grace. It's not that she stops loving, it's that she learns who is truly worthy of her love. And something extraordinary happens during this phase. When she begins to heal, her energy shifts. The universe begins to align itself around her renewed vibration. She starts attracting peace where there was once chaos, clarity where there was confusion, and people who match her healed frequency instead of her wounded one. You see, when a woman who loved purely is betrayed, she doesn't lose, she evolves. The loss she experiences becomes the soil where her wisdom grows. The silence she sits in becomes the classroom where her discernment matures. And the tears she cries become the baptism of her rebirth. I've watched it happen over and over again. Women who were once broken by betrayal emerge with an aura that feels untouchable. They walk differently. They see through pretense instantly. They no longer chase, they attract. They no longer beg to be understood because they've understood themselves. And it's that self-understanding that changes everything. Because when a woman reclaims herself, she reclaims her energy. And when she reclaims her energy, the universe recognizes her again. Doors that were once closed begin to open. Opportunities that once felt out of reach begin to appear. It's as if the divine says, now that you know your worth, now that you no longer settle for less than you deserve, here's what was always meant for you. But while her journey becomes one of restoration, the one who caused the pain begins a very different process. And though he may not see it immediately, his actions have already set in motion a spiritual imbalance that will demand his attention in time. Because every betrayal, every misuse of trust carries a consequence, not as a curse, but as a call to return to integrity. That's where we'll go next. Because understanding what happens to the betrayer, the one who wounds a pure heart, reveals one of the most powerful spiritual truths about how the universe restores balance. When a man betrays a woman who loved him purely, something begins to shift, not outside of him, but within. It's rarely immediate. In fact, at first it often feels like freedom. There's a deceptive sense of relief that comes with escaping responsibility, with convincing oneself that no real damage was done. He tells himself she'll be fine, that he just needed space, that she misunderstood his intentions. But deep within, beneath the noise of excuses and fleeting distractions, the imbalance has already begun. The human spirit was never designed to thrive in contradiction. You cannot live in truth and act in deception without consequence. The soul feels it long before the mind can rationalize it. At first, it appears as restlessness, an inability to be fully present even in moments that should bring joy. Laughter feels slightly hollow. Achievements don't taste as sweet. There's an invisible distance between him and the sense of peace he once knew. And though he may not call it guilt, it lives there, quietly reshaping his world. What he doesn't realize is that betrayal creates a fracture not only in the one betrayed, but in the betrayer's own integrity. Every dishonest act tears a thread from the fabric of authenticity. And once enough threads are pulled, the whole structure starts to weaken. He may still look confident, still move with charm, still command attention, but somewhere beneath the surface, the foundation begins to tremble. Integrity isn't a moral ornament, it's the core structure that holds a life together. When a man betrays a woman who was genuine with him, he breaks something far deeper than trust. He breaks alignment with his own soul. And once that alignment is broken, life starts mirroring the chaos within. It begins subtly. His ability to connect deeply fades. Relationships that once felt easy start to feel complicated. Even when new people enter his life, something about the connection feels forced, incomplete. He might find himself constantly chasing excitement, mistaking intensity for intimacy. But the more he chases, the less satisfied he becomes. He'll tell himself he's moving on, that the past is behind him. But in truth, the past is walking beside him, whispering through the silence between his distractions. Because betrayal doesn't disappear when the relationship ends. It lingers until it's acknowledged. And acknowledgement is something most avoid, fearing the mirror it holds up. This isn't punishment, it's consequence. The universe doesn't seek revenge, it seeks restoration. When love is mishandled, balance demands to be restored. The energy that was once given freely and received carelessly now requires repayment in the only currency that truly transforms: awareness. Over time, the man begins to encounter versions of himself reflected through others. He'll meet someone who mirrors his past behavior, someone who lies smoothly, disappears easily, or withdraws affection without warning. And in that moment, he'll feel something familiar, something eerily similar to the pain he once caused. But this time, he's on the receiving end. The lesson isn't to destroy him, it's to awaken him. And yet, awakening rarely happens in one moment. It unfolds through a series of quiet recognitions, each one chipping away at the illusion that betrayal leaves no trace. He might start noticing how laughter doesn't reach his eyes anymore, how he avoids silence because it echoes with memories he's tried to bury. He might see how relationships keep ending the same way, how connection always slips just out of reach no matter how hard he tries to hold it. It's then that he begins to understand he hasn't been escaping anything. He's been circling the same lesson in different forms. Because until we learn the truth that love demands integrity, life will keep teaching it to us through repetition. Some men, faced with this realization, begin to change. They stop blaming circumstance and start looking inward. They stop trying to replace what they lost and start repairing what they broke, not with her, but within themselves. Others resist the process, seeking distractions in new faces, louder pleasures, temporary highs. But those who resist eventually discover that the emptiness grows louder each time. You see, betrayal doesn't just wound another person, it creates separation between a man and his own peace. And no success, no possession, no pleasure can fill that void until he reconciles with his own truth. I've seen men try to outrun their conscience through achievements, through noise, through busyness. But no matter how far they go, there's always a moment, often quiet and ordinary, where everything stops. A long drive alone, a sleepless night, a conversation that cuts too close. And in that moment, the memory returns, not to shame him, but to invite him back to alignment. Because the moment a man admits the truth, not to the world, but to himself, the healing begins. The same universe that holds him accountable also holds the path to restoration. But restoration only begins where denial ends. So while the woman rebuilds herself and rises stronger, the man's journey becomes one of reckoning. The path back to wholeness isn't through forgetting what he's done, but through understanding why he did it and choosing differently when the next opportunity for truth arrives. And that is where real transformation begins, not in punishment, but in repentance, not in guilt, but in growth. The universe is not cruel, it is corrective, it doesn't destroy, it reveals. And every revelation is an invitation to return to what is real. There comes a moment, always quiet at first, when the consequences of what has been done begin to surface. It doesn't happen through sudden tragedy or visible collapse, but through small, almost invisible cracks that start to appear in the fabric of life. The man who once believed he had moved on begins to sense something missing, an emptiness that no success or new affection can fill. He might not call it guilt, not yet, but it's there beneath every conversation, every silence, every night that feels longer than it used to. It's not punishment, it's the echo of imbalance seeking to be heard. You see, betrayal doesn't only damage the one betrayed, it creates an internal dissonance in the betrayer's spirit. It's as though his soul keeps trying to harmonize with a truth he refuses to face. Every time he avoids it, every time he tells himself it wasn't that serious, the dissonance grows louder. Life becomes noisier, yet emptier. Even joy starts to feel like an imitation of itself. At first, this man may not understand why everything feels slightly out of rhythm. His work might still prosper, his laughter might still sound convincing, but there's a subtle weight behind it all. It's the weight of unintegrated truth. Because until we face the consequences of our actions, they follow us, patiently waiting for acknowledgement. He may begin to notice a pattern, moments of clarity that appear in unexpected ways. A random encounter reminds him of her laughter. A familiar scent brings back the warmth of her presence. But instead of comfort, it stings. The memory, once buried, now returns as a question he cannot escape. What did I really lose? The truth is, when a man betrays a woman who loved him with sincerity, what he loses isn't just her presence. He loses the version of himself that she saw, the version capable of love, loyalty, and depth. She saw his higher potential even when he didn't. Her love wasn't blindness, it was vision. And when he broke that bond, he didn't just break her trust, he shattered the reflection of his better self that existed in her eyes. This is why he struggles later to connect deeply with others. He's not just missing her, he's missing himself. The part of him that was capable of tenderness has been numbed by avoidance. The part that knew how to be honest is buried under layers of justification. Every new relationship becomes a performance, a script rehearsed to avoid pain rather than to create connection. And though he tries to convince himself that love is overrated, that everyone betrays, that feelings are fleeting, the soul knows better. The soul keeps calling him back to the truth. It doesn't shout, it whispers through dissatisfaction. It speaks through that familiar sense of emptiness that visits him in moments of silence. Eventually, he begins to notice how his life feels increasingly transactional. Conversations lack depth. People feel replaceable. Achievements don't bring peace. He may even find himself surrounded by attention, yet feeling completely unseen. That's the irony. When you betray someone who truly saw you, you end up craving to be seen again, but now through eyes that can no longer recognize you. There's a law woven into the fabric of existence. Whatever is taken dishonestly must one day be faced truthfully. That law isn't punitive, it's restorative. The universe doesn't chase us with vengeance. It mirrors us with precision. It gives us opportunities to experience the emotions we once ignored, not to hurt us, but to wake us up. And so life begins to echo his actions. He'll meet someone who tests his patience the way he once tested hers. He'll find himself explaining what he once refused to understand. He'll feel the sting of being unseen by someone he cares for, not as revenge, but as revelation. The very experiences he once dismissed now arrive as teachers. If he's attentive, he'll begin to see the pattern. He'll realize that each disappointment isn't random, but rhythmic, each a mirror reflecting the lesson he tried to avoid. Some men keep running from that rhythm their entire lives. They build careers, families, even reputations, but deep inside they remain fragmented. Others stop running. They begin to listen, and listening changes everything. The moment a man truly listens to what life is showing him, the cycle begins to break. The guilt that once felt unbearable transforms into humility. The regret that once haunted him becomes guidance. He starts to see that what he thought was loss was actually invitation, an invitation to remember who he was before deception took over. That's when transformation becomes possible. Not the surface kind that happens because he wants to look better, but the deep kind that happens when he wants to be better. It's the kind of change that doesn't need to be announced. You can see it in his silence, in his patience, in his newfound ability to stay instead of run. True growth isn't about fixing the past. It's about allowing it to teach you. The man who once betrayed begins to understand that integrity isn't just a virtue. It's a form of alignment with peace itself. Without it, life feels scattered. With it, everything finds its rhythm again. And so, as he starts to take responsibility, not out of shame, but out of awareness, something begins to heal. The same universe that mirrored his mistakes now begins to reflect his transformation. Doors that once closed start to open again. Not external doors, but internal ones. Doors to empathy, to purpose, to real connection. Because in the end, what the universe always seeks is balance. The woman rises through wisdom. The man rises through repentance. One heals through forgiveness, the other through acknowledgement. Both are being shaped by the same divine hand, guided by the same truth. Love was never meant to destroy. It was meant to reveal who we truly are. There is a quiet irony in how life delivers its lessons. The same hands that once held love loosely will one day long to hold something real again. The same lips that spoke careless words will one day search for silence that feels honest. Time, though patient, is precise. It doesn't rush to correct us, but it never forgets. And when the moment arrives, it does so with the gentle force of truth, not to destroy, but to reveal. For the man who once betrayed love, that revelation doesn't always come as a dramatic event. It often comes through stillness, through a simple day that looks ordinary on the outside but feels strangely heavy within. Perhaps he's sitting in a familiar cafe, scrolling through his phone, surrounded by people, noise, and movement. Yet suddenly, none of it feels alive. The laughter of others sounds distant. The coffee tastes dull. He doesn't know why, but he senses that something sacred has been lost. That feeling, subtle but piercing, is the beginning of awakening. This is how the soul begins its work, not by punishing, but by reminding. It whispers through emptiness, through moments that should feel joyful but don't. It allows him to taste the illusion of having everything while feeling nothing. That's when he begins to understand that peace isn't about what you have, but about who you are in relation to truth. At first, he resists. He blames circumstances, timing, other people. He tells himself that love was never meant to last anyway, that everyone moves on, that he's fine. But the more he tries to convince himself, the less convincing it feels, because deep down, he knows something in him changed the day he walked away from sincerity. When a man betrays genuine love, he doesn't just lose a relationship. He loses access to the part of himself that was capable of deep connection. And no matter how many new experiences he chases, nothing quite reaches that depth again. It's as if the emotional world he once knew has flattened, as if color itself has drained from his inner landscape. Over time, this disconnection begins to show. He might still achieve, still attract, still smile, but it's a practiced smile, one that hides fatigue. Relationships come and go, but they all feel the same, temporary, surface level, safe. He begins to wonder why everything feels repetitive, why passion fades faster, why joy never lingers. What he doesn't realize yet is that life is mirroring his avoidance. The emotional shallowness he feels is a reflection of the depth he abandoned. Every act of betrayal carries a cost, but not in the way people imagine. The cost isn't paid in punishment, it's paid in distance. Distance from self, distance from meaning, distance from peace. The more he tries to ignore the lesson, the farther he drifts from the simplicity of genuine living. The universe doesn't rush to correct him because it knows that pain is a more faithful teacher than fear. And pain does arrive quietly, disguised as longing. It comes when he sees someone love without fear, when he watches another man cherish what he once took for granted. He won't admit it aloud, but a deep ache settles in his chest. Not for her specifically, but for the man he could have been if he had chosen differently. That's the moment realization begins to take root. He starts to see how he's been living in fragments, part of him moving forward, another part still trapped in a moment he refuses to face. The conversations he never had, the apologies he never gave, the truths he never told. These unfinished stories weigh on him, not because she's gone, but because they remind him of his own incompleteness. It's in these quiet confrontations that real change becomes possible, because the man who truly sees himself, not through the lens of guilt, but of honesty, is already halfway healed. He realizes that every action against love was really an action against himself. Every lie he told her was a layer of distance between who he was and who he was meant to be. And when this awareness matures, he begins to crave something different. Not distraction, not validation, but restoration. He starts to seek conversations that matter, connections that require truth. He begins to value presence over attention, peace over pleasure. Slowly he starts to rebuild the bridge he once burned, not necessarily toward her, but toward his own soul. It's here that the universe begins to respond differently. Where once it mirrored his avoidance, now it mirrors his sincerity. He begins to attract situations that require honesty and offer healing. He meets people who challenge him to stay when things get uncomfortable, to speak when silence feels easier, to listen without defending. These new connections become his training ground, teaching him the very skills he once lacked: patience, vulnerability, consistency. And through this process, he learns the truth that many never reach, that redemption is not about erasing the past, but about integrating it. The past doesn't disappear when you change, it transforms. The pain becomes wisdom. The mistakes become teachers. The guilt becomes gratitude. The man who once caused heartbreak becomes the man who helps others heal, not through preaching, but through presence. You can tell when someone has walked through their own darkness. They love differently. Their affection carries weight, their silence holds peace, their presence feels grounded. This is what true growth looks like. It's not loud, it doesn't seek validation, it's quiet, consistent, humble. It's the kind of transformation that doesn't need to announce itself because it's evident in every word, every decision, every look in the eye. And perhaps one day he'll cross paths with the woman he once hurt, not to rekindle what was, but to honor what it taught them both. She'll see the change in him, not through apology, but through energy. And in that brief, silent acknowledgement, the universe will exhale. The balance at last will be restored. There comes a stage, often years after the storm has passed, when life begins to reveal the true meaning behind everything that once felt unbearable. The woman who was betrayed and the man who betrayed each stand on opposite ends of a lesson that has quietly shaped them in ways neither could have predicted. By now, time has done what time always does. It has softened the noise, blurred the details, and left only the truth exposed. What remains isn't the memory of what happened, but the imprint it left on who they became. For her, the journey has turned into something sacred. The pain that once consumed her no longer defines her. It has transformed into wisdom that flows through everything she touches. She no longer needs to talk about what happened, not because she has forgotten, but because she has learned. Her silence no longer hides suffering, it reflects strength. There is a certain grace in her presence now, a stillness that comes from having faced the depths and survived them. She understands something that few do, that heartbreak, when faced with faith and truth, refines rather than ruins. She no longer views herself as the woman who was betrayed, but as the woman who awakened. The betrayal was never about her inadequacy. It was a mirror exposing the other person's distance from themselves. This realization freed her from the cycle of self-blame that had once chained her. And with that freedom came transformation. Her boundaries grew firm but kind. Her intuition, once doubted, became her most trusted companion. She now moves through the world with quiet certainty, able to sense authenticity and deception with effortless precision. The softness she feared losing has returned, but now it is fortified, no longer fragile, no longer seeking validation. It's the kind of softness that comes from knowing she can survive anything without closing her heart. The people who now enter her life feel the difference. They respond to her energy before she says a word. She doesn't chase love anymore. Love recognizes her. Opportunities align, friendships deepen, and peace becomes her natural state. The universe always responds to healed energy, and her energy now speaks of self-respect, gratitude, and divine alignment. Meanwhile, the man's story continues in a quieter, more complex way. His lessons don't come in sudden revelations, but through the slow unraveling of his old habits. He begins to see how every attempt to outrun his past led him back to it in disguised form. Each relationship that followed was a reflection, sometimes beautiful, sometimes painful, but always instructive. There's a moment when he realizes that the cycle he's been living isn't coincidence. The distance he feels in his connections, the emptiness that follows moments of pleasure, the restlessness that never fully leaves, all of it traces back to the point where he disconnected from truth. And when this realization fully sinks in, it doesn't destroy him, it humbles him. He starts to see how integrity is not just moral discipline, it's the foundation for inner peace. Every lie, every betrayal, every evasion was a withdrawal from his own spirit. The debt was never to her, it was to himself. And so, without fanfare or drama, he begins the long work of reconciliation, not by chasing redemption, but by choosing honesty, consistency, and presence, one small moment at a time. He learns that apologies mean little when the same patterns remain. So instead of trying to fix the past, he focuses on who he becomes in the present. When life offers him opportunities to repeat old mistakes, to take shortcuts, to avoid discomfort, to use people instead of love them, he chooses differently. Each time he does, the energy shifts a little. The heaviness lightens, the noise quiets. There is a strange beauty in this kind of redemption. It's not dramatic, It's disciplined. He doesn't seek forgiveness to feel better. He seeks truth to become better. And slowly, the man who once wounded others begins to heal himself. The walls he built for protection crumble, replaced by genuine vulnerability. He learns to listen again, not just to others, but to the quiet voice within that he had ignored for so long. In this quiet return to integrity, something miraculous happens. His capacity for love deepens, not the kind of love driven by need or desire, but the kind that flows naturally from wholeness. He discovers that when you're at peace with yourself, you no longer fear intimacy. You no longer perform affection, you embody it. And though he may never cross paths with the woman he once hurt again, the energy between them has already shifted. What was once discord has become balance. Her forgiveness, whether spoken or silent, has released both of them into their separate destinies. There is no bitterness left, only understanding. Because when a person truly heals, they no longer wish for revenge, they wish for restoration, even if it happens far away from them. The beauty of this universal law is that it always leads back to balance. The one who was broken rises wiser. The one who caused the break learns humility, and both become participants in a greater order of renewal. Love, in its purest form, was never meant to make us comfortable. It was meant to make us conscious. And so the story moves forward, not as tragedy, but as transformation. The woman carries her wisdom into new seasons, unafraid of being open again. The man carries his awareness like a compass, determined not to lose himself again. Each of them, in their own way, has been rewritten by truth. That is how the universe restores balance, not by punishing, but by transforming. The pain that once divided them has become the quiet force that evolves them. And though they walk different paths now, both carry the same lesson etched deep into their souls. Love is not destroyed by betrayal, it is refined by it. There's a point in every story where the past no longer feels like a wound, but like a teacher. It's subtle. There's no grand announcement, no clear line between pain and peace. It happens in small ways, in the way she no longer flinches when his name is mentioned, in the way he no longer feels the need to justify what happened. The story that once held both of them captive begins to release its grip. What remains is not regret, but understanding. And that understanding changes everything. For her, life has found rhythm again, not the old rhythm she once knew, but a steadier, deeper one. She wakes up in the morning without the heaviness that used to greet her like an old companion. She moves through her days with purpose that isn't tied to anyone else's presence or validation. She laughs again, not the polite laughter she used to offer to mask pain, but genuine laughter that bubbles up from a place of quiet peace. This is what healing actually looks like, not forgetting what happened, but remembering it differently. The same memories that once broke her now remind her of how far she's come. She understands that closure doesn't come from an apology. It comes from finally seeing the truth clearly enough that it no longer hurts. She no longer waits for someone to make sense of the pain. She doesn't analyze every detail of why or how it happened, because she's learned that understanding betrayal isn't about dissecting the person who betrayed you. It's about rediscovering the person you became in the process. The betrayal was the catalyst, but the healing was the real story. Now she uses that wisdom like light, not to expose others, but to illuminate her path forward. She no longer gives her energy to what drains her. She no longer tries to fix people who aren't ready to face themselves. She has learned that peace is expensive, and she's no longer willing to trade it for company. There's a quiet dignity in her boundaries, not walls, but gates. She decides who enters her life, and she does so with grace, not fear. And it shows. People feel it in her presence. There's something magnetic about someone who has made peace with their past. It's not perfection that draws others in, it's authenticity. The kind of authenticity that only comes from someone who has walked through the fire and refused to let it harden them. But what of him? His journey, though different, is equally sacred, a quieter redemption unfolding through repetition and reflection. For him, healing doesn't come all at once. It arrives through a series of choices that seem small but carry weight. A conversation where he tells the truth instead of hiding behind excuses. An apology offered without expectation. A moment of silence where he listens instead of defending. He begins to see that integrity is not a single act, but a rhythm, a daily alignment between what he knows is right and what he actually does. And slowly, that alignment begins to rebuild the trust he once shattered, not with her, but with himself, because the hardest person to forgive is often the one staring back in the mirror. He starts to realize that love was never the problem. His fear was. His inability to stay present when things became uncomfortable, his instinct to run from vulnerability, mistaking it for weakness. Now he understands that vulnerability was never the enemy. It was the invitation he kept declining. This realization doesn't bring instant peace. It brings honesty, which is far more valuable. It strips away every illusion he built to protect himself and leaves him with something real, humility. And humility, unlike guilt, has the power to rebuild. Guilt keeps you stuck in the past. Humility teaches you how to live differently in the present. With time, he begins to see beauty in the lessons that once haunted him. The heartbreak he caused has become his greatest teacher. The woman he once hurt becomes, in his memory, a symbol, not of shame, but of truth. He doesn't idolize her or romanticize the past. He honors her, because her pain was the mirror that showed him the cost of living without integrity. And yet he doesn't linger there. The point of redemption is not to remain chained to remorse, but to rise from it renewed. He knows he can't undo what was done, but he can ensure that his future is built on different soil. He begins to live with awareness, not in constant self-punishment, but in gratitude for the lessons that reshaped him. It's in this awareness that both of their journeys converge again, not in person, but in energy. Both have returned to truth, though through opposite paths. She through release, he through repentance. And because truth is always magnetic, their stories find harmony without reunion. Perhaps years later, they will cross paths again, perhaps not. It doesn't matter. What matters is that when they each think of the other, there is no bitterness left. Only quiet acknowledgement, an unspoken thank you between souls who met, broke, and grew. That is the secret the universe hides inside heartbreak. It's never just about losing someone. It's about finding yourself through the breaking. Love, when pure, never truly disappears. It simply transforms. It becomes wisdom, empathy, clarity. It becomes the invisible force that guides every better choice you make afterward. And so her strength becomes her gift to the world. His awareness becomes his redemption. What was once pain becomes purpose. The story that began with betrayal ends with awakening. Two lives, each transformed in opposite ways, yet both carried forward by the same divine current of truth. Because in the end, every heartbreak, every mistake, every act of deception is simply a summons to become more conscious. The universe is never trying to punish, it's trying to wake us up. And when we finally do, we see that nothing was ever truly lost. It was all being rearranged for our becoming. There is a moment, quiet but undeniable, when healing turns into transformation. It happens long after the tears have dried and the anger has lost its fire. It doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives, like dawn breaking after a long night. Both of them, the woman who was hurt and the man who caused the hurt, find themselves standing at the threshold of something new. But this time, it isn't about each other. It's about who they are becoming in the aftermath of everything. For her, life has settled into a kind of peace that no one else can give or take away. The pain that once made her question everything has now become a quiet teacher that walks beside her. She's not the same woman who once loved with naive trust, but neither has she become hard or cynical. Her love has matured. It's wiser, cleaner, freer. It's no longer about attachment or the need to be chosen. It's about alignment, about choosing herself first without apology. She understands now that love isn't about finding completion in another person. It's about sharing wholeness. For years, she had mistaken connection for completion, believing that love meant losing parts of herself for someone else's comfort. But betrayal forced her to rebuild from within. And in that rebuilding, she found the truth. When you are whole, love no longer costs you your peace. And so she moves through the world differently now. Her energy feels grounded. Her words carry weight, not because they are loud, but because they come from clarity. People are drawn to her without knowing why. She radiates something rare, the calm of someone who has walked through fire and come out shining instead of burnt. She no longer needs to prove her worth. Her presence speaks for her. What she once saw as loss has turned into liberation. She's not waiting for closure. She's living it. Every morning she wakes up knowing that peace is not a prize to be earned, but a choice to be protected. And that choice, made daily, has become her greatest victory. Meanwhile, the man's story has taken on a quieter tone, one of reflection, accountability, and gradual rebirth. For him, transformation didn't come as an explosion of realization, but as a slow, humbling process. It came through the repetition of lessons that life kept offering him until he could no longer ignore them. There were moments when he thought he was healed, when new love felt fresh, when success distracted him from regret. But eventually he learned that avoidance is not the same as peace. Peace only comes when you stop running from yourself. One evening he sits alone, perhaps in the same city where everything once fell apart. He looks at his reflection in a window, and for the first time in years, he doesn't see who he pretended to be. He sees himself. Not the confident mask, not the charming illusion, but the man beneath it all. And for the first time, he doesn't look away. It's in that stillness that something shifts. He begins to understand that redemption isn't earned through apologies or good deeds. It's lived through consistency, through choosing honesty when it's inconvenient, through showing up when it's uncomfortable, through staying when escape would be easier. He stops trying to rewrite the past and starts rewriting himself. He doesn't beg for forgiveness anymore. He begins to live in a way that deserves it. Slowly, the chaos he once carried begins to settle. He starts to feel grounded again, not because everything is perfect, but because he finally is. And though his transformation may never be visible to the world, it's real. You can hear it in the way he speaks, see it in the way he listens, and sense it in how he treats others. The same intensity that once fueled his mistakes now fuels his growth. The same vulnerability he once feared becomes his strength. There's a particular kind of wisdom that comes only from living through your own contradictions. He now understands that betrayal of others, of self, always costs more than it gives. It takes time to rebuild what was lost, but with every act of integrity, he stitches himself back together. He doesn't run from depth anymore. He welcomes it. He knows that true connection only happens when you show up whole. Their lives, though separate, are still guided by the same unseen thread, awareness. The universe has balanced the scales not by making them equal, but by making them evolved. What once connected them through pain now connects them through wisdom. She who once gave everything away too easily now gives consciously with discernment. He who once took without understanding value now gives with intention. Both have learned that love without awareness leads to suffering, but love grounded in awareness becomes sacred. And here is where the deeper truth reveals itself. The point of their story was never the relationship, it was evolution. They were mirrors for each other, reflections of what needed to be seen and healed. They met not to complete each other, but to awaken each other. That realization doesn't erase the past, but it reframes it. What was once seen as betrayal is now seen as initiation, the painful but necessary process of becoming more conscious. Without that storm, neither would have grown into who they are now. So she continues her journey, confident, at peace, open yet guarded by wisdom. And he continues his humble, intentional, aware that every choice now carries weight. One day, perhaps, their paths will cross again. maybe through a chance encounter, maybe through the subtle weave of fate. And if they do, they won't need words. There will be a quiet recognition, a shared understanding that they were never enemies. They were lessons. And in that moment, both will know nothing was wasted. Every heartbreak, every mistake, every tear served a purpose. Because the universe never wastes pain, it repurposes it into wisdom. That is how balance works. That is how love, even when it breaks, still leads us home. There comes a time when the lessons of the past stop feeling like stories you survived and start feeling like truths you now embody. It's the quiet phase after the storm, when life no longer feels like a series of tests, but a field of choices. Both of them, the woman who was once broken and the man who once caused the break, now live in that field. Their paths have diverged, but the wisdom that came from their shared pain continues to guide them in parallel ways, almost like two rivers born from the same rain. For her, life has turned into something intentional. Every decision, every word, every silence carries the weight of awareness. She no longer rushes. She no longer confuses movement with progress. She has learned that true growth is often invisible, that the most powerful transformations happen in the unseen corners of the soul. The world still tests her sometimes. People come close, some with pure hearts, others with hidden motives, but she no longer reacts. She responds. There's a difference. Reaction comes from old wounds. Response comes from healed wisdom. And she has learned the beauty of responding. There are days when the past tries to whisper again. A song, a scent, a memory, small reminders of what once was. But instead of pain, she feels gratitude. Gratitude for having lived, for having loved, for having learned. Because she knows now that the depth of her pain was only equal to the depth of her capacity to feel. And that capacity, once refined, has become her power. Her heart is not harder, it's clearer. It doesn't close, it chooses. She loves again, but differently. Not with desperation, but with direction. She knows that love is not supposed to complete her, but to complement her. And she no longer measures the worth of love by how long it lasts, but by how true it feels while it's alive. In her peace, she's found something she never expected: purpose. The same experiences that once made her feel small now give her the authority to speak, to guide, to inspire. People are drawn to her not because she's perfect, but because she's real. She speaks from scars that have healed cleanly, not from wounds still bleeding. And when she talks about forgiveness, she doesn't mean pretending it never happened. She means releasing the weight that no longer belongs to her. She has understood one of life's quiet truths. Closure isn't something you wait for, it's something you create. And she created hers the day she decided that her peace mattered more than her pain. Meanwhile, the man's journey has entered its most humbling chapter. He has stopped trying to prove that he has changed. Now, he simply lives differently. The bravado that once defined him has faded into calm. He doesn't chase validation anymore. He seeks alignment. He doesn't crave admiration. He craves authenticity. And that change didn't happen through sudden enlightenment, but through the slow practice of honesty. There were moments that tested his growth, moments where the temptation to repeat old patterns reappeared, disguised as opportunity. But this time, he paused. He recognized the familiar energy, the echo of who he used to be, and chose otherwise. That's how redemption works, not through grand gestures, but through quiet decisions made in moments when no one is watching. He has learned to sit with discomfort without numbing it, to speak when silence feels easier, and to stay when running would be simpler. He's learning that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about staying faithful to truth, even when fear is loud. And though he doesn't talk much about the woman he once hurt, she lives in his lessons. Every act of kindness, every honest conversation, every boundary he now respects, all of it carries traces of what she taught him through pain. In a strange way, she became his moral compass, not through presence, but through memory. He sometimes wonders if she would even recognize him now, not by his appearance, but by his energy. The boy who once took love for granted is gone. In his place stands a man who finally understands what love costs. Not in money, not in time, but in truth. He no longer seeks to find her again. He seeks to honor what her presence awakened in him. Because some people enter your life not to stay, but to plant the seed of who you could become. And if you nurture that seed, their purpose has been fulfilled. The universe has a mysterious way of balancing stories. The one who was broken learns freedom. The one who broke learns responsibility. Both become guardians of wisdom. One from having endured it, the other from having caused it. And in that divine symmetry, both are redeemed. There's a quiet beauty in this stage of their journeys. They no longer exist as two halves of a tragic story, but as two complete souls walking different roads, guided by the same light. She continues to rise, rooted in self-worth. He continues to rebuild, anchored in truth. Neither owes the other anything anymore, only gratitude. Perhaps somewhere they both look at the same sunset and feel the same thing, peace, not because they return to each other, but because they each return to themselves. And that is the final gift of healing, realizing that closure doesn't come from a reunion, but from recognition. The recognition that everything unfolded exactly as it needed to, so both could grow into who they were always meant to be. Pain in the end was never punishment, it was preparation. And love, the kind that survives betrayal and distance, doesn't always return as romance. Sometimes it returns as wisdom, balance, and the quiet knowing that everything, even heartbreak, served a divine purpose. That is how the universe restores harmony, not through revenge, not through reunion, but through evolution. Two souls, once intertwined in pain, now walking in peace, each carrying a piece of the other's lesson, forever changed, forever free. Time has a strange way of revealing truth. It doesn't rush, it doesn't warn, it simply unfolds layer by layer until what was once confusing becomes clear. And now, years after the storm that once defined them, both of their lives have reached a depth that can only come from understanding what pain was really trying to teach. For her, peace has stopped being an abstract idea. It's not something she seeks anymore, it's something she carries. It's in the way she breathes, the way she walks, the way she says no without guilt and yes without fear. She's no longer moved by the same things that once shook her. The approval she used to crave now feels small compared to the serenity she's built within. She has become her own home, safe, grounded, and unshakable. She used to believe that healing was about forgetting, but she has learned that it's actually about remembering differently. She no longer sees her past as a wound, but as a map. Every heartbreak, every disappointment, every silence that once felt unbearable now points to something sacred, the path that led her back to herself. There's a subtle strength in her now, a quiet confidence that doesn't need to prove or explain. People notice it, but few understand where it comes from. It comes from survival, not the kind that keeps you breathing, but the kind that teaches you how to live again. She moves through her days with intention. The woman who once overgave now gives from overflow. The woman who once begged to be seen now stands fully visible to herself. She no longer confuses chaos with passion or attachment with love. She knows that peace is not boring. Peace is alignment. She once feared losing people. Now she fears losing her peace. That shift, that subtle reordering of values, is the sign of real healing. And yet she remains soft, not naive, but soft, capable of loving without surrendering her dignity, capable of trusting again without ignoring her discernment. There's a beauty in how she now holds space for others. She listens, she understands, but she never shrinks herself to make anyone comfortable. Her boundaries aren't walls, they're gates with keys she chooses carefully. As for him, life has moved at its own deliberate pace. The loudness of his old life has quieted. The thrill of distraction no longer excites him the way it used to. There's a certain fatigue that comes when you've chased too many empty things, a fatigue that only truth can heal. He has reached that point, the constant movement, the endless pursuit of validation, the temporary escapes, none of it holds meaning anymore. He's not the same man who once thought love was something to conquer. The arrogance, the impulse to control, the fear of vulnerability, all of it has worn down under the weight of self-awareness. He no longer runs from the mirror. He's learned to look into it and accept what he sees, flaws and all. It took him years to understand that forgiveness doesn't begin when someone else absolves you. It begins when you stop lying to yourself. Now he lives slower. His days are simpler, his presence quieter. He values stillness, not as an escape, but as a practice. He's learned that peace is not the absence of responsibility. It's the reward of living truthfully. There's no longer a need to defend, no need to perform. He knows what it feels like to lose something pure, and that knowledge keeps him humble. Sometimes he remembers her, not as the woman he lost, but as the woman who reflected his truth back to him. She was a mirror, and at the time he couldn't stand what he saw. But now, with distance and growth, he sees that she wasn't his punishment. She was his opportunity. He may never get to thank her, but in his heart, he already has. Every act of kindness he now gives, every truth he now speaks, every moment he chooses love over fear, all of it is, in some quiet way, his thank you. Life, as it always does, has given both of them new chapters. Hers is filled with purpose, connection, and calm. She's no longer afraid of being alone because solitude no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like power. She understands now that her value isn't determined by who chooses her, but by who she chooses to be. His chapter, too, is unfolding differently. There's no spotlight, no applause, but there is depth, the kind of depth that only comes from accountability. He's learned to love not as possession, but as presence. He shows up for people now, not to impress them, but because he understands the sacredness of trust. He no longer runs when things get hard. He leans in. And in some quiet corner of the universe, their energies have made peace with each other. The cycle that once tied them in pain has completed. There's no unfinished business left between them, only lessons, only gratitude. They no longer think of each other with ache, but with acknowledgement. Because ultimately, every soul that crosses our path is both a mirror and a messenger. Some stay, some leave, but none arrive by accident. She was meant to learn her strength through the breaking. He was meant to find his humility through the loss. And in that divine balance, both found what they were truly searching for themselves. This is how life restores harmony, not by bringing people back together, but by bringing them back to wholeness. The story that began in chaos has settled into peace. They don't need to meet again because their reunion already happened in awareness, in forgiveness, in evolution. And that is the quiet miracle of time. It doesn't erase, it refines. What once broke them has now built them. What once divided them has now balanced them. They no longer walk as victim and culprit, but as two awakened souls who finally understand that love, even when it hurts, was always trying to lead them home. There comes a stage in every journey when reflection no longer feels like dwelling, it feels like clarity. The story that once defined you becomes a story you can now define. The woman and the man, once bound by the invisible thread of pain, now stand in separate chapters of the same book, each carrying the wisdom the other unknowingly helped them earn. Time has not erased what happened, it has redefined it. For her, life has become beautifully simple. She doesn't chase anything anymore. Not love, not approval, not closure. What once felt like an open wound has transformed into quiet strength. The world hasn't changed. She has. She moves differently now, with an ease that comes from being anchored in herself. She doesn't need to explain her peace or defend her boundaries. Her energy does that for her. She's learned that love isn't about losing yourself to prove your worth. It's about sharing your fullness with someone who can hold it with care. Her heart, once too open, now carries discernment like a second heartbeat. She listens to energy more than words. She recognizes alignment more than promises. She understands that someone's intentions are louder than their declarations. This awareness isn't cynicism, it's wisdom shaped by experience. There are moments when her past crosses her mind, but it no longer stings. It simply reminds her of who she used to be and how far she's come. She no longer revisits memories to find meaning. She looks back only to honor her own becoming. She has forgiven, not because he deserved it, but because she did. Forgiveness, she learned, isn't a reward you give another person. It's a key you give yourself. In that release, something extraordinary happened. Space opened up inside her, space for new things, new people, new dreams. Where once there was heartbreak, there's now purpose. She's found herself doing things she never imagined she'd do, leading, creating, inspiring, not to prove she's healed, but because healing naturally expands your capacity for life. Pain, she realized, wasn't the end of her story. It was the introduction to a new one. Meanwhile, his transformation has taken a quieter, more reflective form. There are no grand gestures, no loud declarations of change. His growth lives in his silence, in the way he now pauses before he speaks, in how he listens without trying to control the outcome, in how he shows up for others without expecting anything in return. He has learned that true strength has nothing to do with dominance. It has everything to do with accountability. The man who once ran from discomfort now faces it head on. The man who once feared vulnerability now sees it as a sign of courage. And though his life is different, maybe simpler, maybe lonelier at times, it finally feels honest. That's what he longed for all along. Not excitement, not validation, but peace. The kind of peace that comes from finally living in alignment with your own truth. He doesn't talk about the past often, but sometimes in quiet moments, it finds him. He thinks of the woman not with regret, but with respect. She is no longer a symbol of what he lost, but a reminder of what he learned. There's no bitterness left, only gratitude. Gratitude for the lesson that love is sacred and that to mishandle it is to lose yourself. It took him years to understand that love is not a possession, but a reflection. How you treat someone who loves you reveals the relationship you have with your own soul. When he broke her trust, he didn't just wound her, he fractured his own integrity. And it took losing her to realize that integrity is the foundation of peace. Without it, everything collapses, slowly, silently, but inevitably. Now, his life is quieter but richer. He has discovered joy in simplicity, purpose in truth, and strength in humility. There's a steadiness in him now that didn't exist before. People sense it. They may not know his story, but they feel the depth in his presence. He no longer needs to convince anyone of who he is. He simply lives it. And though their paths no longer cross, the energy between them has shifted into something pure. Not longing, not tension, just understanding. They are no longer each other's unfinished business. They are each other's completed lessons. What began as heartbreak has matured into harmony. The universe always seeks balance, and it has found it here. Her healing was never separate from his growth. They were two parts of the same equation. Her rising created space for his reflection. His repentance mirrored her strength. Together, they formed a cycle that began in pain, but ended in purpose. If they were to meet again, by chance perhaps, years later, there would be no weight, no awkwardness, no unspoken words, only the quiet acknowledgement of two souls who shared a lesson and honored it. A smile, maybe, nothing more. But that smile would carry everything. The forgiveness, the gratitude, the peace, because that's what real healing looks like. Not forgetting, not returning, but recognizing. Recognizing that everything unfolded exactly as it was meant to. Recognizing that love did not fail. It fulfilled its purpose. It broke them to rebuild them. It wounded them to awaken them. And now, as they each continue walking in opposite directions under the same sky, there's an invisible connection between them. Not of romance, but of remembrance. A spiritual knowing that they were instruments in each other's transformation. They were never meant to stay forever. They were meant to awaken forever. That is the quiet genius of divine timing. It never wastes a connection. It uses it. Even endings serve destiny. And when both souls finally understand that, the story that began in pain ends in peace. With no bitterness, no regret, just a sacred knowing. Love was never lost. It was completed.